I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Anatomy of a Movie. This week being Valentine's, we'll be doing an open heart surgery. Going back in the past for Shakespeare In Love. I'm John Comerford. I'm joined on the big panel by Marissa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
Sarah Stratton.
Hi, guys.
Dimitri Panos.
Happy Valentine's Day.
All right. Does everybody remember back to 1998 when this came out?
I do. Because I have notes right in front of me.
Of course. Yes, you would. As you would.
I kind of remember it being in theaters,
Wait a minute.
really
The music is swelling. Are you feeling it? Are you
getting wrapped up in the emotion.
I am wrapped. Yes.
That's right.
I'm swelling in love.
Yes.
Wait.
Close. All right. So, I thought this was a nice choice for us. Why not? You know, it's Valentine's week, so.
This is probably one of my favorite romance movies of all time. I do not remember seeing this in theaters. I do not think I was allowed to see it when it was in theaters.
You and me both.
So I found it after, and I probably found it in around high school, and it was kind of when I was also getting into Shakespeare, and I just fell in love with this movie. I'm still in love with this movie. It's probably one of the most frequent movies that I revisit. So I'm very happy to be talking
Marissa,
about it today.
do you like this one at all? I can't remember.
I love this movie. I have probably watched Shakespeare in Love about 4 times in the last year already.
Wow.
And then, but
Is that since January, or is that in the past 12 months?
past 6 months probably. I love the story of Romeo and Juliet, and I got into Romeo and Juliet in high school because we were forced to read
That's
it,
when
but
everybody
I
gets
loved
into
it. And then, I discovered Shakespeare in Love around the same time, and it just really hit me, and it stuck with me, and I've loved it ever since.
Dimitri, chime in here.
I appreciate the movie for what it is. I don't herald it as one of the greatest romance movies of all time. I do show it, especially, and I should say this, I just watched the movie last night. First time I've seen the movie since I saw it in theaters in 1998. So to me, it always goes as the movie that stole the Academy Award for Best Picture from Saving Private Ryan. Not that I was bitter about it, but that's what it always went down as. And, I'll talk about that later. So revisiting the movie and going in that it's Valentine's Day, and I recognize the romance in the movie, but to me, I was like, wow, I'm really surprised as to how much a farce it plays on the movie business. I know nothing about producing a play,
Right.
Outside of Bialystok and Bloom. So, but the movie aspect of the producer and don't they get back end? Oh, sure, but what if we make no money?
Profit.
It's like, well,
Profits.
great, even better. So all that stuff I really liked, but then I noticed that the movie was more about writing the play and putting the play on. I found most of the emotional stuff came from when Romeo and Juliet was being played out, and the birth of it, the origin of it, the way that this movie supposes that it happened, that I really enjoyed. The romance, you get involved with it, but at the end they don't end up together. There's no particular reason, other than the Queen
neither
says
did Romeo and Juliet. So
yeah, well, but there's a reason why they don't end up together. I do like the little Shakespearean nods, the miscommunications and things like that. So I appreciated. I had a reappreciation of the movie, and then researching and looking at what the other things that it won, like costume, and you get it. You understand why the production design on it was fantastic. And then something else I noticed was the editing to it. I thought was very smooth and I was like, wow, this movie was edited, put together very well, and
Well,
so I appreciated it for all those.
It has a huge flowing presence. I mean, you walk away feeling the romance. Not only for me, I do feel it between the characters, but you get this adaptation that to me is technically skillful, and that the shots do flow. That there's like a warmth, and there's fabric, and there's feathers, and just the design of it is wonderful, and it adds to that romance along with the movie. And then on top of that, there's so much intellectual property that they're grasping and twisting, and to me it exists in these layers where they do direct references, where they're also showing scenes, and then there's also the whole other section where you can see his plays just in subtle characters, whether it be like Merchant in Venice being, you know, broke and having to look for dowry, and you get that with her fiance. It's just all over the map, and to put so much in a film. And I know there was a comment about, like, they thought that it was almost going to be too smart for the audience. But I think people really enjoy that. They enjoy being able to watch it over and over again and be reminded of all the different things. And that's what I really love, that it captures the multi-layer. It's technically and visually pleasing. And then on top of that, I do feel the love story in it. So
yeah, there's a love story. Like I said, and all that. You don't even have to be that well versed in Shakespeare, I think, to enjoy this movie. You know, you'll get Merchants of Venice, or you won't. You go along with the story. It flows pretty evenly, and then hell, if somebody had watched it in 1998 or today, and maybe it encouraged them to pick up and read Shakespeare, you know, hey, that Billy Shakespeare, he could be a big writer someday. You know,
he doesn't suck.
He doesn't suck. Yeah. So
if he existed,
that's true. If he even wrote them,
if he even wrote them,
if we're gonna believe the conspiracy theory.
And they make nods even to the conspiracies in this movie, and I find that
bringing Marlowe in and the fact that he had somebody else write it for him because he's got great penmanship. I mean, that's what I thought was great about this, as everybody's already talked about. I thought it was well crafted because it not only spoke to the conspiracies about Shakespeare, but also it brought in whether it's theater or film, the whole thing, and behind the scenes and all that, and the shenanigans that go behind there, as well as it informs the audience of what is involved in the artistic process, and what the muses are, what's the inspiration for this or that, and it's. Not only is it very specific to Shakespeare, it's very general for anybody who's in the artistic process. You don't know where all those things come from, and they find their way into your work. And that part I love.
I agree, the artistic process and the whole behind the scenes of the theater production, because I've done a lot of theater, and just knowing what that's like, and going through those bad auditions, and then getting all these roles that somehow turn into something else, and then all these things that even when you're going live on stage and actually performing it in front of everyone, things change and you just have to go with the flow. And then,
one of my favorite moments is Jeffrey Rush when they say, well, how's it going to work out?
I don't know.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is.
And somehow it does.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of theater. And I love it.
I like, another one of my is on the pamphlet. Like,
yeah.
So I mean, but today, and I don't. It could have been it could have been foreshadowing or their foresight into the. You go to the movies today and it's 10 minutes of a Skydance production of an Anna Perina film brought to you by Village Roadshow, by Sideshow Collective, presents a Warner Brother film. And that's all I was thinking of. I'm not going, that's actually sort of brilliant considering that was 1998. And I like those little touches. And again, for me, it was more of the creative process. It was more of that was the emotional, like, when Gwyneth Paltrow shows up to play.
To audition.
Right. And, that was not to audition, like at the end, like when they're putting the play on.
Ends up playing
And
Juliet.
she plays Juliet. Like, you're like, everybody was, it's like, that's an emotional moment because the play is going to go on, and little things like the show must go on.
And not go on. And not only go on, but go on in the proper nature that we want to see it. Like, not the initial plan that they set in stone, but how almost like fate would have it, or with the ideal situation, and that's what ends up going up in front of the audience. And so it just adds even more that she ends up playing her, in a way, herself.
Exactly. And then even beyond that, because beyond the shipwreck, she's playing Viola now. I mean, I mean, it's just so well crafted and well layered that you could watch. And I've enjoyed it many times since 1998. So I find myself as I watch it, I go, oh yeah, I don't have time. Oh, I love the scene. Oh wait, yeah, I can't wait for him to say it. And
Wait, just give it another minute because there's a really good line.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I find myself being charmed by it all over again and wanting to watch it. And sticking through it.
And I think one of the uncredited performances or not, he's credited, but he's not given as much credit due. Ben Affleck is fantastic in this movie. He's hysterical.
What is my pot?
Well, originally he was approached
Gwyneth
for the
Paltrow's
role,
boyfriend,
and that's why he did decide to do this movie. But he was also approached to play Shakespeare for this film instead of just the side note. Yeah, or it was like mentioned as they were searching and almost in
Did
vain.
not know that.
But
Thank
even
you.
his character, even Ned had added to the story because it was his suggestion to change the name to Romeo and Juliet, and then it was his suggestion to write in the love scene in between marriage and death, and so even his small character was still relevant.
Yeah, I think, because you see him, he starts out being this guy that just wants his part, his grandiose event. Then he realizes he starts getting sucked into the art of it as well, and says, no, it needs this.
Suffering cats.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we enjoy that.
Well, it's chock full of like fantastic actors. I know the other day when we were talking about Philomena, Judi Dench got her a nod to this film. Also, obviously from the Academy, winning for, I think it was, she won for, what is it, 8 minutes?
12. I
Was
think.
it
No,
12?
it was under 8.
Really?
8 minutes.
I thought it was 12.
And the only person who beats her for winning is someone won for a 6-minute piece.
Wow.
So she's like the second shortest best
It's a good gig.
supporting actress nominee. Yes.
It's impressive.
Or it's power.
Yeah.
It's power. It's really being able to convey.
Or it was stolen.
Who do you think it was stolen from?
Our residents.
I mean, well, again, it's an 8-minute performance, and she's great. Don't get me wrong. But throughout the entire movie, do you really believe that she snuck into that theater at the end and nobody noticed her? She sort of kind of just shows up at the end of that. It was like, whoa, how'd the queen get here? It's like, yeah. It's like,
Well, I think but that's speaking to how wrapped everybody was in the performance of the show.
Yeah,
Nobody
which-
saw it because they were so in tune with
Justification.
What Romeo, that's right.
Yeah.
That's how good the play was.
okay.
You know, you got the preacher that's now crying. Just
The preacher was funny too.
Yeah.
Because again, that happens today. You know, you get the religious right going against movies and whatnot, and I mean, those are the touches that for me made the movie enjoyable to watch again. And these are, again, having so many years between seeing it again, and in a sense, being able to watch it fresh. Those are the parts that I really enjoyed, and John Madden's direction was really good. I mean, everything on that picture worked. You know, I don't think many of the people like John Madden after that hasn't really amount. You know what I'm saying? Like, so all those people that worked on that movie collaboratively, from set design to costumes to, it worked in that movie like really well, very well.
And it was also one of those just situations that, I mean, I was just reading about the cast and how they felt about each other. And although this movie took a long time to get on its feet, which I'm sure we'll get into, once it did and was in the shooting process, the 3 months of actual shooting, the cast was so happy with each other and having such a good time that they literally, some of them were concerned that the movie would flop.
Because you're having too good of a time.
Because you're just having such a wonderful time that it can't be any
course.
good.
Bad dress.
And
Good open.
but I mean, it turned on its head. And
Yeah. Oh, it going back to your thing, yes. The second shortest performance to win, under 8 minutes. The shortest ever performance was by Beatrice Straight in the movie Network, 1976.
Oh, wow.
And she appeared on film for only 6 minutes.
See,
So Beatrice Straight.
you can get an award off 6 minutes.
So
It can
Beatrice
be done.
Straight opened up this can of worms back
Yeah.
in 1976.
I don't know that it's much of a can of worms.
Well,
Possibility.
it comes to
gives us
question.
hope.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you hope, but I mean, it also comes to question about best supporting. Like, what's the definition of best supporting actor? Or
That
actress?
is it's not like there's a time limit on
Right.
it right now. There's no. Go ahead.
I mean, I just
But
think
6 minutes is shorter than most of the shorts that are nominated for best live action
I don't
short
disagree.
film.
I mean, but also you have to think about the other end, like when you come from like a theater background where they do tell you that like it doesn't
There are no
matter
small
if
parts.
there are no small parts, something like small actors, whatever the cliche, but it's true. But it's
Right.
like you're supposed to be invested even as an ensemble, even if you have one line, and not to overdo it, but to just really be real and truthful, because it's just about the focus. So I think that it just proves that notion that you don't need to be in half the film or in every scene, because sometimes the supporting actors still are in every scene pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
if you think about it, Judi Dench's character, Queen Elizabeth, when every time she came on the screen, everyone was forced to bow down to her. So we as an audience were forced to pay attention to her as well. And I think that was another factor that helped us like really pay attention to her acting and her character and what she added to
Right.
the story. So that helped with probably her nomination.
There was an underlying like psychological
Yes.
like, oh, you
she's
must
the
like
queen.
her
we
because
have to pay attention to her.
they're just guiding. So basically, if you want to win anything, don't go in films for a long time and be very powerful people that people are intimidated by, and you will win just by psychological nature.
No,
That's what I'm
Or
taking
have some
out
sort of
of this.
physical affliction.
And because we had asked, so we had for Best Supporting Actress that year, Judi Dench, obviously, Kathy Bates for Primary Colors, Lynn Redgrave for Gods and Monsters, Rachel Griffiths for Hillary and Jackie, and Brenda Blethyn for Little Voice
There
All
we go.
worthy nominations.
Yes.
For sure.
for that year. And then if you want another interesting 1998
Yes, we do.
trivia for Shakespeare in Love and Judi Dench. 1998 was the only year that two actors were nominated for Academy Awards for playing the same character in two different films in the same year. So you had Judi Dench was nominated and won for Best Supporting for playing Queen Elizabeth in the movie, and Kate Blanchett was nominated for Best Actress portraying Elizabeth in Elizabeth. 1998, yeah. So that's to me is like fascinating.
That is
all
very
stuff.
interesting.
Yeah.
And it's like, who did it better?
Yeah. And it's also
automatically.
it says also worth noting that Joseph Fiennes portrayed the love interest in both of these films. That Jeffrey Rush was nominated for a BAFTA award for his performance in each, winning for Elizabeth.
Wow.
Those English, they just
Yeah.
keep hiring themselves in
Well,
these
they
British
do.
movies.
I
They
mean,
do. They're always in
They,
these movies.
you know, and they had amazing cast in this.
Yeah.
It was just everywhere, every character. I mean, every small part, so to speak. It's like, oh my God, they got him for this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I
They're
loved
just
it.
very-
It was fun to
people.
see Tom Wilkinson
Yeah.
too. Like I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he was
Jeffrey's
in
feet to the fire. It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. I put your
And I feel like the group that they ended up with this movie is just so fitting for it.
Yeah.
I mean, the original cast and was really first put into its initial push for production is Julia Roberts instead of Gwyneth Paltrow. And from there, she wanted Daniel Day-Lewis to play her Shakespeare, and then that fell through. And we had people like, Kate Winslet was up for the role. And I think that just almost there's such a kindness that these two characters have. I feel like between Gwyneth Paltrow and Joseph Fiennes, but also a sense of comedy and sense of passion for the words. I think that was really important to make this movie, because Shakespeare is literally all about the words. I mean, that's what I think it's one of the most popular things to ever say, that you can literally just listen to the audio and you will get everything, because every emotion is written down. It's like sometimes they say in film, it's, you catch the emotions in between, just in the looks and the close-up. And for Shakespeare, it's so much, the focus, the tension is in what they say. And I think that they carried that through in this movie, which was really important to me as like a Shakespeare lover.
Yeah, and it just seemed too. I mean, I don't know if this has ever been said of Shakespeare. Not that I'm a Shakespearean historian, but he wrote for the cheap seats. He wrote for people that
He was right.
couldn't exactly see.
They were
Right.
commercial ventures. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way.
yeah.
But
They were
so-
the penny, the
Right.
petty stand.
But it was
people who
also
paid penny.
it was also the time.
Right.
I mean, now we're such a visual culture, but in the time of Shakespeare, it was total audio culture. Like, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Not everyone was literate. Everything was spoken. Like, the average amount of words they used in speech was like triple the vocabulary we use today.
So
No,
like,
the
which
other way
is
around.
It's because they didn't have text or Twitter or Instagram
No,
or
but it was-
LOL or
But
yeah,
was,
they didn't have that.
It was
they
more than that.
talked
Like
to people.
you were always communicating through language. Like you didn't have things to
That's
write
what I'm
down. You
saying.
were always memorizing things.
Right.
Exactly. So it makes sense that why all of his effort and emphasis
Yeah.
was on that.
So, the other thing too that I found of note that's still prevalent today too is, and again, again because I don't have a theater background, it's more movies, is the treatment of women and giving women larger roles and bigger. I mean, that is something that is being talked about even still today within movies. I don't know about theater, and then when you have the Gwyneth Paltrow's character and there aren't enough stronger roles for what we need, and then she comes on and they're going to shut the theater down. And like that to me, I can't even imagine a day when like there was like, you had that guy playing the maid who was hysterical and, but all the men
Carson
played
from Downton Abbey.
and it's an interesting period to look back because historically, even though the events in this movie may not be like accurate, but going to the theater, they definitely depicted it. So much so that Judi Dench, the theater that they
In the roast,
built,
yeah.
she bought it built so that it could be used as a theater. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did it ever get reassembled and used? Because I know she was given it for after the production, and she was trying to create a playhouse for students, but I don't know if it ever actually got accomplished. I couldn't figure that
I
one
had found
out.
that she had just bought it and wanted to use it. It was so detailed and
But where do you put it? I feel like it's like,
right where it is.
Just have it stand.
like I just have this big theater. It's just chilling in my backyard. But I mean,
And she's down Judi Dench. She probably lives in the Wayne Manor over there.
Somewhere in London, next to the Pickle, I think.
there we go.
Yeah.
But
We'll go
yeah,
visit.
I love the aspect of the Rose Auditorium that they had there because that's very similar to what they used back in the Elizabethan era, and the acoustics that they had because it was round and it made it sound better when people projected on stage, and even the just having all that and the writing that goes into it and the turnaround for the plays back then they would spit these plays out in a week and
12th Night.
yeah, the writing, the process is so fast. For nowadays, we have more time to really build upon productions. But back then, it was like a new play every week. It was something people demanded and something people loved. And so all these actors would have to learn all these lines in a matter of days.
Yeah.
And just that talent back then, it was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the depiction, and it was very colorful. And again, for winning like production design and stuff like that, you just go, well, yeah, of course. I mean, it was beautiful. It was lush when it needed to be, and the construction going into it was fantastic. The costumes were amazing, and to see it, on a decent, good size HD TV, and you see the colors and the stitching, I was like, okay, yeah, no.
Yeah, here's the
qualms.
thing about that is I have no idea how authentic they were to the time. I have no idea. I just don't.
No idea.
I don't-
Yeah, I'm with
but
you.
They were amazing.
They look great,
And
right?
I was like, wow, look at that.
Because you just feel like they have their categories, like who is both. It just works very well
Yeah.
without and it feels real. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is supposed to be period. You're just like, oh, I'm here and it's wonderful, but it's crisp and
I also like how muddy and dirty they made it look,
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
walking through everything. It's just, yeah.
Yeah,
And his
I agree.
fingers are all just.
Oh yeah, his
disgusting,
fingers are all inky. Yeah.
I mean, they just
Yeah.
they just did all that kind of stuff. I love that.
What was it? Does anybody know? I didn't look it up, but he would throw. It almost seemed like cornmeal onto his pages.
Oh, okay.
So the
And-
ink doesn't
So the ink
dry.
doesn't run.
Is that what it
Yeah,
was?
so
That
the ink
that's
doesn't
for?
run.
Yeah. Because I thought that whole thing was that aspect of the movie I really liked a lot, and the whole process of the play and his muse. Like you're right. I mean, to me, this really is about the muse and finding that inspiration to write these words, and if it's love that does it, then that's fantastic, and that's what's proven here. But that process is what to me makes this journey fun for me. Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I had no qualms like Gwyneth Paltrow. Like she was really, I mean, she's still an attractive woman, but God, going, wow, she was really attractive back then. She was, but she was very good. And this also started, though, if you remember, this also started like she wouldn't do a movie without an English accent. Like she had a string of movies.
I don't.
She had a
I don't know if
lot
she
of-
wouldn't. Was that the thing? I know that she did, but I don't.
She did a well,
No, she
she
did
did.
a
Emma.
lot.
It's almost like it was in her
Emma,
contract.
Possession, Sliding Doors.
Doors,
Like
yes,
she did
yeah.
all these movies in the late 90s.
I'm just wondering if that's what you got offered. Like, okay, I'll do another one.
Yeah.
I thought it was written in
Yeah.
her contract.
Okay,
But
I
I
hadn't
don't
heard
know.
that one.
But she did it well.
No,
Yeah,
she
it's
did.
fine.
Yeah, she did.
Didn't have a problem with that.
Although I believe she is from California.
I know. Yeah.
So,
No.
switching.
Yeah, she was good.
Yeah, no, she's very good, but everybody stepped up to the plate. You know, I can't point to a performance in that movie and say, boy, they were bad.
Yeah, no one
Everybody's
dropped
good.
the ball on it. It wasn't like we went, oh boy, shoot.
Yeah,
And I
Like
think
that
didn't
on
get-
screen.
Yeah, I think it was like every character had a purpose, even
Yeah.
as small as John Webster,
Yeah.
that, like who we know he came out to be an awesome playwright as well, and just like the little people here and there, they still had a point. They
Yeah.
had relevance. That was
Yeah,
Some
like
sort
no-
of intellectual
yeah,
property.
no one was a throwaway character.
yeah. Even Tilda Swinton.
Yeah.
That I mean, I'm watching the movie and I'd forgotten she was in it, and I was like going.
I'm forgetting who she was in it.
She was the maid, isn't that not Tilda?
Oh no, that's Imelda
no,
Staunton.
Imelda
Imelda.
Staunton.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
She was the maid,
She's
and,
the
and
nurse,
I'm looking
the
at
nurse.
her, the nurse, and I'm like going, why do I know her? She looks really familiar. And then she was in Harry
Harry
Potter,
Potter.
and I'm like going, but she was so funny in this movie, so evil in Harry Potter, but she was great. It's like, where's my Romeo? He's dead, and I'm like, that's great. That part just
Yeah.
cracks me up. And she was, again, it just proves how everybody was so engaged on that in the play. So it was working.
It was hard for me to watch Harry Potter knowing that she came from Shakespeare, because I'm like, she's such a mean person in Harry Potter,
I know.
and she's such a lovable person in Shakespeare. I had a hard time going back and forth between her, but she was great.
And she's her
I love the
ally
nurse.
throughout the whole,
Yeah.
which is great too.
Because in the story Romeo and Juliet, Juliet's best friend essentially is the nurse, and I
Yes.
love the connection how they built upon that in this movie too.
What I liked about this movie also is that the flavor of it approached Shakespeare in an interesting way. It wasn't like, let's be extremely serious and straightforward because this is something we've built up for centuries and need to respect. It was like, let's approach Shakespeare in a fun and caring and loving way that we can.
And peel back the curtain on it a little bit.
Yeah,
That's- for me,
exactly.
it was like,
and they didn't put it on a pedestal.
Yeah.
They used all of his works. They played with it. They talked about controversies. Hinted at them, and it was fun. And it really just back to the line of like, all you need for a comedy, is a dog, and you need all these little aspects, and it can be drama, but it can still be the kooky people who are going to dress as other people, and he's going to be a nurse, and who knows.
Well, even how the play behind the movie started which was Romeo and Ethel, the
The
Pirates.
Pirate
I was
King,
like, what? And then how it not transgress, but how it moves along and morphs into whatever. I mean, I just thought that part was hysterical, and in doing so, we got to see the evolution of not only the artistic process, but how
Sorry.
how it might happen for others and stuff like that.
I think the other thing too that it does for Shakespeare is it made him accessible. You can go into Shakespeare in Love and again not have much
Not even
education
understand.
and you will find the movie entertaining.
I think-
You won't feel like you're being there as an education, and it's not like watching like a remake of Romeo and Juliet and whatnot. You can go there, understand the dialogue, the language, and it makes it very accessible
that
to an
goes
audience.
to what Sarah was saying. We put it on a pedestal, and the other thing we've already mentioned is that he wrote for the masses.
Right.
That's what they understood at the time. And these days, oh my God, it's so hard
It's
to get.
Shakespeare.
And we're
Right.
like, No, it's actually written. It's a populist storyline.
Right.
So, but it's kind of like Neil Simon.
Sure.
I mean, of the day.
No,
That's the same thing.
John Lennon and Paul
Exactly.
McCartney.
And
Difford and Tilbrook.
Also, Queen Elizabeth as herself, she loved these plays, so it was kind of in demands from her that she wanted to see all these things as well. And then it was just something that was a cultural thing. Everyone went to go see it. It was like everyone watches movies now. Everyone went to go plays back then.
Right. Yeah, and and again, the movie made $100 million. At the box office in 1998, and so
Do we have an idea? Do we know the budget is?
Yeah, well, let's see. I
got around 65 million.
Yeah, I get production budget at about 25. So the total budget around 60, which makes sense. And then it opens up on December 11th, 1998. It opened up on only 8 locations, and it did $224,000 at that point. So that means word had gotten out. That's not bad because it's a decent per screen average. And to date, the total gross is over $100 million. $100,317,794 is what it's done.
And
so
how many
A lot
Oscars?
of money and a lot of awards.
Seven Oscars.
And I think 13 nominations.
Was it?
Um,
Really?
13.
And it was one of the only movies ever in Oscar history to win for Best Picture, and I think get that amount of Oscars,
7
but
Oscars.
not
7.
get Best Director.
Poor John Madden.
Yep, it's like just keep standing up, keeps throwing people up there.
Yeah.
John Madden's still sitting.
Yeah, but you have to understand
Bruce
that
Beresford.
movie was not the movie that was not the favored movie that year at all. Like I wasn't joking when I said it's the movie that stole the Academy Award from Saving Private Ryan. Private Ryan was like when they called Shakespeare in Love, like that put a spotlight on Oscar campaigning and the behind the scenes to Oscar campaigning that may have been around sort of kind of, but that was at the time the most ever spent in a campaign ever.
Yeah, prior to that, it was, let's say it was under the radar a little bit.
Right.
I guess
And under the
Shakespeare
radar,
kind of
yeah.
was much more overt.
And this one just came. I mean, the amount of spending that the Weinsteins and Miramax put in for the campaign. DreamWorks was like they had to shell out more money for their campaign for Private Ryan, and he was doing things in 1998 that are way more relevant today, and commonly like the screeners. Like he, unbeknownst to he sort of kind of did a sneak attack and sent screeners out to people. So it's crazy when when today we're taught, we have the controversy about best song and whatever, and like this sort of thing has been going on for a long time, and it's that's why I'm saying like to say John Madden was standing up. No, he wasn't. Like nobody expected Shakespeare in Love to get this award. Period. Like
I'll disagree slightly, only because I don't remember it that way in my experience. I knew a lot of people that thought it was a really good movie and deserved those nominations. You can't expect that nobody thought it was a good movie. It has 13 noms.
I didn't say that they didn't say it was a good movie. I'm saying they didn't.
They didn't think it was a
It was
winner.
not the It was not the front runner for winning Best Picture that year. That's all. That's what I'm saying.
In hindsight,
So-
looking back, do you still think it was stolen?
Absolutely. I mean, when I'm looking at a legacy, people still talk about Saving Private Ryan today. People don't so much talk about Shakespeare in Love as much as like we were
I guess
talking.
Not in your circles, but
and
other
that's, like,
circles,
yeah,
they don't
in
talk
my
Saving Private
circles,
Ryan.
like, and like I watch Saving Private Ryan, but like I will watch this movie at least once a year. I'll watch Saving Private Ryan every 2-3.
Right.
They're both wonderful movies, and I'm not saying that Saving Private Ryan didn't like break boundaries or wasn't technically good or anything, but to me, it doesn't feel like it was stolen. I feel like I love that it won Best Picture because to me it should get recognition, and it combined so many. It's an adaptation, but it's real people, but romanticized, and it's intellectual, and it's smart, and it's emotional, and so to me it was just such a fulfilling movie that I would want it to win. And like if it was in the race right now for Shakespeare in Love and Private Ryan, like my vote would be going for Shakespeare in Love. So I would want it to win.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and I can understand why people might think Shakespeare in Love was a big surprise, because if you think about it, Shakespeare in Love does have a lot of comedy in this movie, and a lot of Best Picture winners are really more serious, dramatic movies, so I can see why that kind of snuck up on them. But Saving Private Ryan, it was very dramatic, very heart-wrenching kind of film, and Shakespeare in Love is pretty much the opposite. It's very heartwarming and happy and
Makes
kind
you
of
happy
free.
in a way about life.
So it was like
Fun.
two different, realms and two different
Genres going head to head.
two completely different films.
And I don't disagree with anything that you said. I'm just going back. We're turning the clocks back to 1998. We're getting in that DeLorean, and then when you look at, like,
let's be honest,
again,
Richard, did you really just want Star Trek to win?
well, yes, it was. Well, I'll get back into that later for Star Trek Insurrection, but no, I mean, at the time when you have New York Times, AMC Film Site, Time Magazine, MTV, HitFix, NPR, Vulture. I mean, Vulture and NPR are still talking about Shakespeare in Love. And if you look on any, I'm not making this up. If you
The list you say what has been stolen and what.
Yeah, and Shakespeare in Love is one of them. And then the movie that I was involved with, in a sense, is another one, Crash, which people say that took it away from Brokeback Mountain. So I understand being on that side of the fence, how that feels. But if you look up or just Google, all you have to do is go Oscar campaign controversy. Shakespeare in Love will come up in 9 out of 10 articles. So, I mean, it really, at 1998, when Saving Private Ryan was not given Best Picture, like, that was a big deal at that time. And like I said, there was a reason why it put Oscar campaigning in the spotlight. It put it under the microscope. And it's when you're saying they were like, the Weinsteins were like the Yankees of of the Academy Awards. They were being said that they were buying awards because of all the money that they spent. That's either good or bad. Listen, Harvey Weinstein, that guy has done so much for the independent business. It's crazy. And he's done a lot of good. And I would say, if he supports you, man, you don't have a better backer than this guy. I mean, this guy has backed Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, some of our great actors, and if he loves what you do, you've got the best man in the business in your corner. And I think in legacy times, when it comes to independent film, there's a handful of names, and Harvey Weinstein will definitely be there. So, when you look at all the quote-unquote shenanigans that happened for Academy Awards in 1998, that was a big deal, and it's still being talked about today. Like, NPR had, within the past week, they talked about it, and they linked to an article in Vulture magazine as well. So it's just very fascinating. And when you look at the Academy Awards today about how the Weinsteins are doing, like, this year, they're not doing as well, but Judi Dench is nominated. So we'll see what if the Weinstein can pull his magic for it. But I mean, what the Weinsteins have accomplished with Miramax and the Weinstein Company is just incredible. So regardless of shenanigans, you give them credit for everything that they've accomplished and the great films that they've given us. I'm not saying that Shakespeare in Love is not a great film, but maybe in that year, for me anyways, it still should have gone to Private Ryan, but it opened up a can of worms and causes this discussion.
That's true. It's true. And it makes everything more heightened. I mean, everyone has their opinion, right? And that's why you hope that everyone's vote gets represented. And if you really feel passionate about a movie, then you will not be bought by the campaigning. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, the other side of the argument is that smaller movies, independent movies, are going up against huge
blockbusters.
Exactly. So that's one of the reasons why they had to do that in the argument. I don't know how much of that is true, but I understand the argument.
But again, the movie made $100 million too.
Yeah.
So again, for a movie whose widest was just a hair over 2,000, that's really solid. Like, that's good, especially for Miramax. That's good business for them.
Right.
I have a question.
A lot of people must have liked it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The $100 million is to date, correct? Do you by any chance have the numbers of what it made that year?
Yeah, it made $100 million.
Oh, during that year. Okay.
Yeah, it was that year. Let's we'll start off with sorry about that. We can start off. Shakespeare in Love was the number 18 movie of 1998. So and with 100,317. Before it was the Rugrats and Prince of Egypt, which is a DreamWorks movie.
Both of those were great movies too.
I really liked the Prince of Egypt.
So
I really liked
in that year. That year alone, we had Saving Private Ryan was number 1, 216 million. Armageddon was number 2, which you would think maybe a Michael Bay movie would go over a very difficult to watch, like, a war movie, but Armageddon was number 2. Number 3 was Something About Mary. So that's something that really happens at 176 million. A Bug's Life, Pixar, that was their second movie that did 162. That was 4. Waterboy was number 5. That's when Adam Sandler was still
I
riding
was going
high.
to tell you the exact same
In his
thing.
heyday.
Dr. Dolittle was number 6. Rush Hour was number 7. Deep Impact, another asteroid movie, was number 7. Number 8. And Godzilla was number 9. And Patch Adams was number 10. So that's what the movie landscape was in 1998.
Yeesh.
Crazy.
But if you think about it, a lot of those movies are comedies.
Yeah, I
A
mean,
lot of
something
those
about
movies are comedies.
That's very
Something
true.
about
Dr.
Mary,
Dolittle,
Patch Adams. I mean, granted, Patch Adams is a little bit more dramatic, but there was a lot of comedy in all those movies.
Lethal Weapon 4.
People were in a
was
good
11.
mood.
Rush
in
Hour.
98, wasn't it?
I mean, all of those are great movies.
You
It's
know,
a great run.
well,
movies.
Godzilla's not that great of a movie. I don't think Waterboy I would hold up there. Armageddon, I don't know.
All right,
Something
they're
About
all
Mary's
fun
great.
movies. They're all fun movies.
Populist, made for the masses, as we were just saying.
There you go.
Yeah, so it had good competition, and even when it came out that weekend, I mean, this is what it went up against in 8 locations. Star Trek, number 1 movie that weekend. Star Trek Insurrection did 22 million. A Bug's Life had come out. That had been out for 4 weeks, and that was number 2. Jack Frost, which is a Michael Keaton who becomes a snowman
Snowman.
movie.
Oh my
God.
That was
Too many
the
times.
number 3 movie.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's
Enemy-
a sad movie too.
You like that movie?
No, I was surprised that you said that.
I've seen
Sorry,
that movie
I
too many
forgot
times.
Oh, we're not getting Michael Keaton on anytime soon, I guess. Enemy of the State was number
Smith.
4. The Rugrats movie was number 5. Waterboy was number 6, and at that point it had been
okay.
out for 6 weeks. So, I mean, that's the movie landscape in 1998. And when you look at, again, the highest, like Star Trek was 2,620 locations. I mean, again, we're moving to that point where the saturation, like once we get into the 2000s, I mean, the megaplexes are really starting to come into play. So now you go from a release of 2,000, like this is 2,620 locations for Star Trek. The last Star Trek movie, I'm willing to bet, was 3,500. I mean, and you're bringing in lots more dollars. So, it's that's why I love looking back to see how the business of distribution has evolved and what it does. And again, for a movie like Shakespeare in Love to make $100 million, that's pretty big. That's a pretty big deal.
Because how much? Let's see. What was Catherine Bigelow's Oscar?
Hurt Locker?
Hurt Locker. Yeah. What did that make?
4, 5. I mean, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even Philomena, which we were talking about,
Yeah.
as a, so for any independent movie like that to make $100 million back in 1998 and your first go out is 8 locations and the highest you get is just a little over 2,000. That's a good stretch. People like it. It had. Well, that's the other thing too.
So smart
Legs.
investment by the Weinsteins.
Oh, absolutely.
That campaigning paid off. Big
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and think about the legs.
Yeah.
I mean, what movies today? I mean, I can't think of any that
would stick around,
11
yeah.
weeks is when you hit your peak.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
after being out for 11 weeks. That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
There's a few. I feel like I'm like trying to think about nowadays if we do things, and like award seasons will bring out peaks later.
Sure.
So like, and it's often the more art house films. So for instance, like Gloria. Gloria came out on I think a DVD like over a month ago, and it's a documentary about backup singers, and it's getting a huge flux of people. And honestly, I think might even be hitting its top seats now because they had to bring it back to theaters
Right.
to have more people see it and get a viewing on it. So I think that's where you're going to find those movies, the long runnings that are the ones people literally have no idea about, and then some award brings them back into the eye.
Yeah, I mean, your art house fare, if it's good, will typically can stay in an art house like a Landmarks of the world, your Lemleys and whatnot. They can stay in theaters. Number one, they need the product, so it can stay in theaters for a while. But again, when you look at a Shakespeare in Love and what it did, for coming out in December and then in February you hit 2,000. So you're up there, so you're still making money, and then all in you make $100 million, and you're out at least through Oscars. up until that point. And so you're generating money. The other thing too to note is that the DVD window was a hell of a lot different back in 1998 than it is today.
Well, is there a DVD window?
Yeah, it's supposed to be like 3 months. Supposed to be, But now with on demand and day and date,
DVDs.
That window has changed distribution practice immensely. And that's why I say, like, if Shakespeare in Love were released today, I think they would have had to have taken a different tack far as marketing the movie.
I think we could also, I'll make the argument then that it's because, for an Oscar or I should say for a movie to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Picture, for me, it has to operate on all cylinders. Every department has to be doing well. And this movie does. I mean, and I think it's got legs, or it had legs, because it started out small, but people just...
Of course it has legs. It's here today at Anatomy Movie. It's a Valentine's movie.
But I think it's not just a testament to the campaigning, but it's just...
No, it's
a dead solid movie.
To the movie. No, absolutely. And again, making Shakespeare accessible to people, having it be a comedy and having a romance and having it be light, and, people can gravitate towards that. And that's what... when you get good word of mouth like that, other than it just being a Shakespeare movie, when you say, hey, it's Shakespeare, but it's fun, and I loved it, and it had this great romance, and it had this in it, that perpetuates your box office.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about it, because it's a period piece, it is timeless in a sense. It doesn't, you're watching it again, it doesn't feel like dated in any way. I mean, because it's already dated.
Yeah. Yeah, and they didn't...
It's a wonderful thing about period movies.
Isn't that nice?
And they may have, and again, I don't know because I didn't grow up in that era. They may have softened the language up a little so that it's, understandable.
So less body?
But it makes... Again, it's just all about, it makes it accessible, it makes it fun. It's not like a spoonful of medicine.
I think they did a great job mirroring what Shakespeare was supposed to be back when it was written. It was accessible because that everybody understood the references in the language and everything. And so they did the same thing to a modern ear, so to speak.
Yeah. I agree, especially with the writing, because Shakespeare writes an iambic pentameter for all of his stories, and that's, I think, to the normal ear now, that'd be still hard to understand. But but now, and with Shakespeare and how they wrote it out, it was understandable in a way that audience could still comprehend everything that was going on, even though it was a little, the writing was kind of in reflection of the iambic pentameter, but we still understood everything, the characters and the plot twists and stuff. It wasn't as confusing as a regular Shakespeare story would be.
Right. And
so even the writing was brilliantly done.
Yeah, it was very smart. Those guys, Tom Stoppard is one. I mean, and this guy's been around. I mean, between being part of Brazil, Empire of the Sun, Anna Karenina, Shakespeare in Love, obviously. And again, now you have they won, I believe, for best. I forget what it was called back then, but it wasn't like a best original. It wasn't best original screenplay. It had some other long name, but. Really? Yeah, it was. Hold on one second. It was called
Trivia.
Yeah, it was like it was like I shortened it to Best Original Screenplay. Mark Norman, Tom Stoppard, and you know what? No qualms. I mean, I agree. They wrote a very original screenplay that, like we talked at the beginning of the show.
Shakespeare should get some credit for this?
Shouldn't it be an adapted screenplay? I mean,
I would vote for.
Either way, it would have worked for me.
Maybe it should be nominated in both.
That's what I mean. Either way, it would have worked for me. I would have been okay.
What's he going to sue for royalties at this point? I mean,
his estate.
Does he have one still?
Oh, the Stratford-on-Avon's one.
Stratford-upon-Avon.
Yeah, I think that, but I don't know. I mean, they use, obviously, Romeo and Juliet, and you're hearing that, but I think the whole plot around it. Not just
Romeo and Juliet. You had Twelfth Night in there, Two Gentlemen of Verona,
but
all these Shakespeare references throughout.
Which makes it brilliant, but they weren't, but we were focused around Romeo and Juliet and how that movie came together. And what I think is without having any, I mean, I don't know what kind of reference they could use for how he wrote. I mean, this is basically a fictional account as to how he came about being the inspiration for this. And that, to me, is what's brilliant. So they thought about all this stuff, threw in all those Shakespearean references, but it didn't. We don't know that it happened that way because it probably didn't, but who cares for this? Because you're along for the ride and you're going, wow, if it did go down this way, well, that's what I had a good time.
Pretty cool.
Oh, I completely agree with that it's a fictional account. But I wonder if if you took this into percentages and went through the script line by line, how many of these are taken from plays and how many of them are original sentences? Because between the double dialogue of the inspirational scenes and the translation to the stage, you've pretty much accomplished almost the entire play of Romeo and Juliet and all these additional works and sonnet references and all of this. Martin. So it's like, I just wonder if you like divided it up, like highlight everything in red that was quoted, how
or
what
even
the
the
percentage
scenes,
would be.
like the scene when he's visiting Gwyneth for the first time, and the nurse is calling her.
Anon, everything.
And it, all those things. I don't know if they're the exact lines, but you're getting the entire scene.
And even her mother, the scene with her mother that's taken. Scenes with, I believe, the dowry scene is from another play that I can't recall about how much they're worth and blah, blah. All of that is, if not direct quote,
it's referential for sure.
Exactly. And so how much of that really, like, obviously the original parts have to be where you have like the Henslow and people like talking about this exact production or whatnot.
Well, but it's all the plotting as well. I mean, the plotting is original. I mean, that
and the combination, how they
put it. So
definitely.
Again, that's why I think that they deserved for best original screenplay at that time. I think they did a fantastic job, and it still flows. But again, most key is that it's accessible. I think that your college kid can watch it, and your high school student can watch it if the parents going to let them watch a rated R movie. But that's fine. I mean, and they'll get it.
And rated R.
True.
Yeah.
Boobies.
Oh yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow. How do you not Gwyneth Paltrow?
I don't remember seeing.
Yeah.
She's very nice. Yeah.
But I mean,
Well,
I
the
guess
version I saw recently was on TV. So
I just really want. I wish they had it credited, and then we could like all make the joke that William Shakespeare has an Oscar, and then I'd be happy. That's really what I want. So
Shakespeare should have won in postmortem.
Wait a minute! Didn't the
did he win one?
Who?
Didn't the most popular Romeo and Juliet movie, didn't that win an Oscar?
Baz Luhrmann's
No.
version, or which one?
You're talking about Romeo and Juliet?
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet.
Olivia Hussey and
that's the one.
Like Franco Zeffirelli.
Did it win?
Franco Zeffirelli. That's the guy I was thinking of.
I don't know.
Didn't. Let's look it up because for some reason I'm
Hello,
thinking
computer.
that may have. I thought.
Kind of just Google has William Shakespeare
Baz
ever won an
Luhrmann.
Oscar?
Oh, good God, child!
There's a lot of Romeo and Juliet films out there.
Yeah, but I said the best one.
I didn't hear it.
Wow.
Goodness. You know what? I
Careful,
like
Dimitri,
that
your
version.
disdain is showing.
I like Baz Luhrmann's version.
Well, the other thing I wanted to point out just about the writing, we were talking all kinds of things about how well I even like the little moments. Just maybe it's because I'm a writer, but every time Will would sit down to write, he'd do that little routine that he had. He'd spin in a circle, he'd spit, and he'd right stuff. I go, yeah, I get that. The ritual. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Even just the little moments there, and I don't know if that was written into it or if that was just something he did as an actor. That was his choice or whatever, but it was a nice one. Nonetheless.
And going back to the combination of the little references thrown here and there when they're kissing on stage for the first time. When Romeo and Juliet has to kiss, and then Will sees that they're kissing and he's not happy with it. And he's like, no, not quite. Allow me.
I did find it.
Again. That was brilliant.
And it won for best cinematography, and it won for best costume design.
But it didn't
win. And it was nominated for Best Picture. But Shakespeare was nominated because this was Romeo and Juliet. Yeah. And Franco Zeffirelli was nominated for Best Director.
Yeah.
So he got nominated.
I don't know.
Wait, he wrote it. I mean, I don't think it was an adaptation. I mean,
it doesn't say anything about writing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There was no Best Original Screenplay or adaptation.
It says
that's
writers.
Where it would need to be.
Yeah, it says writers William Shakespeare, Franco Brasati, I'm sure they had to make a screenplay, so to speak, but William Shakespeare is the main credit.
They didn't win that
one.
one.
I'm sure they didn't do a lot of changing of the dialogue.
No, not that one. And again, if you can find it, I don't know. It's much better than the Baz Luhrmann version.
That's the one I have on my computer.
It's actually probably the
which one?
It's probably the most faithful adaptation.
Yeah, I think it was
of Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it's the one that I was brought up of like that's probably the one that I saw in high school. and
That's the one I
whatnot, yeah.
have.
So
Look at that.
and Olivia Hussey
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Very good stuff.
Can we talk about the editing in this film?
Please.
Because
No,
I
we
thought it
want
was
to.
so brilliantly well done. How they just smoothly transitioned from scene to scene, from on stage to off stage to behind stage, and it was just so perfectly crafted that there were moments in this film you couldn't tell if they were on stage or if they were saying
it
their
was
thing
just-
being like.
It was very well
Off
blocked.
stage, yes,
too.
I agree.
It was,
Yeah.
it was theater-esque in its blocking
Yeah.
in some respects. Of course, it should have been, but anyway.
And now in the scene that you're talking about, I know exactly the one. It's when they were started off backstage during the play, but when the camera pulls back, they're actually on
They're
stage.
actually in front of the audience.
But I, for me, like, I brought up, I mean, David Gamble's out. I mean, I noticed it watching it. My favorite scene was the scene where they're rehearsing the
Yes.
balcony.
Right.
And that is a scene which kept on going from the balcony to the bedroom, back to the balcony. And
Did you ever get lost, though, right?
no,
No, I know. Isn't that
never.
interesting?
It was
so
brilliant.
brilliant.
And the reason why I asked
Brilliant.
that is because I'm just thinking
Good
about
question.
that, and I was comparing that with Anonymous, the movie that was done a couple years ago about Shakespeare and whether or not he actually wrote the things. And everybody got lost in that movie, especially in the first act. It's like, what the hell? Where are we? Who's talking? And in nowhere in Shakespeare in Love were you ever lost, and where you were,
Not at
what was
all.
going on. It was seamless.
See, very
Yes.
much so. And I had to look up, David Gamble, and I'm like, this guy did an amazing job on that movie. I thought just that flow and the way that whole scene was, let's say, choreographed.
Right. And, and I will give him that nod. I'll also say whoever wrote it, because they had to be thinking that ahead of time, or
Right.
whoever blocked it or staged it,
Right.
and whether that's the director or the cinematographer, because all the camera movement and all that stuff was working on all cylinders.
It was
Everybody
precise
very
and-
collaborative.
Yeah.
It was precise but soft.
Yeah.
And it was that soft flow.
Yeah, you didn't
just,
notice
like,
it. It
felt
wasn't
like
in the
was an
way at all.
artistic line, and
Yeah.
it's done very well.
Yeah, it's done in a romantic way, and even that scene in compared to the fight scene when they have on theater when they're throwing around swords and fighting each other,
Falling off the stage.
That was awesome. It choreographed well as well because they go be underneath the stage and then you see the chaos on top of it. Just like even that was fun to watch.
Now, here's something that I just found very interesting about Mark Norman. Well, first I'll go to regarding Shakespeare in Love. Writer Mark Norman's credits getting the idea for the film when his son Zachary called him from Boston University and suggested doing something on William Shakespeare as a young man in Elizabethan theater. It took 2 years for Norman to come up with the idea of having Shakespeare struggling with writer's block in Romeo and Juliet.
What a great,
But
it's just a great
Idea.
idea.
and as a writer,
Yeah.
like, I mean, again, it's a great, it's like, we always think William Shakespeare, because none of us could say that we've met him
No.
or know his personality.
But we can say that he's extremely prolific, or at
Right.
least based on
Correct.
his portfolio.
And being a writer, but nobody ever thought of,
Yeah.
well, how was he if he
Yeah.
must have gotten writer's block at some
Exactly,
point, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
How did he get out of that?
I think that I
It's
think
great.
that the fact that one niche is so in a way streamlined, it let him tackle this very complicated world. Because if he went into this being like, I'm going to try and combine all
Yeah.
of Shakespeare's plays and works, how am I going to do this?
Right.
But it really was just,
Yeah.
he took this one seed and it let him access.
And it's such a
this
simple
whole
little
thing.
idea. Shakespeare has writer's block.
Yes.
And it starts from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Wonderful.
it's
It's like
great.
trying to pick a lock with a herring.
But let's find out where this his screenplay before Shakespeare in Love was Cutthroat Island.
Interesting.
He also did
Interesting.
a Charles Bronson movie called Breakout,
I know that, yeah.
and he
Based
wrote
on a book.
he wrote
True story.
for Mission Impossible, the television series. So I mean,
Nice.
isn't that funny? Like
Wow.
you go for like the movie
Yeah.
before was one of the biggest all-time Hollywood flops of all time,
Yeah.
and now you're getting the Academy Award for Best Original
Yeah,
Screenplay.
that's true.
It's
Again,
great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much
It's
hope.
great. It's
But his script wasn't bad.
no.
So.
Well, for Cutthroat Island, it was not that good.
I don't think it was a bad script. I mean, it had many more issues on that, but I don't think
Next
the
year's
script is bad.
Valentine's Day episode.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there you go. Yeah, it was very well written, and like I said, no qualms. It being an original screenplay, absolutely.
I really would love to know what Tom Stoppard brought and where it was and how. I just want to know that story. I want to know how that evolved. That particular script, just as much as it was fun to see how Shakespeare in Love evolved as we were watching the movie. I want to see how the script evolved because I would love to know how that happened.
I agree. That would be very interesting. I'm sure we'll call him up, get him in here.
Yeah. That's it. We're gonna find that out. All right. Well, what's left? Anything else we want to talk about?
Well, I mean, Mark. We were talking about editing, and Mark Gamble went on. I mean, he did Veronica Guerin, so he got to work with Cate Blanchett. Shop Girl, which is a Steve Martin movie. The Site, Shakespeare in Love. Then he did a lot of miniseries. They seem to be like BBC Armistead Maupin's Tale of the City. So
that's American.
And so all these movies he did, I mean, Shop Girl, it's listing him in 2005 as the last movie that he edited. So again, when we're talking about, but when we're talking about working on all cylinders, like a lot of these people that we just talked about never really, after this movie, never went on to bigger and better things, so to speak. I mean, the writer didn't really do much after that. I can't say about the director, John Madden, like what he did that would have rivaled this movie, So we had lightning in a bottle with Shakespeare in Love. I mean, it really, when you look at the people that were those creative types, and then of course, look what happened to Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck at that time was really going down that path of being one of the most hated people in Hollywood because it was after Gwyneth Paltrow. At some point or another, he ended up with J-Lo and
Geely.
He ended up in Geely. Yeah.
Daredevil.
Yeah, Daredevil. Like I said, but he's turned it around and
except he still has everybody now on him for Batman.
For Batman,
Jesus,
I know
guy,
he can't get a break.
Exactly.
He can't get a break.
There's a bunch of haters against Ben Affleck. I mean,
yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, I mean, so but Gwyneth Paltrow is very happy with the Coldplay guy there, and she'll do the Iron Man movies because that's a good paycheck for her. Tom Wilkinson can, he still is.
Tom Wilkinson will always work. He's always working. He was in the bedroom. Remember the bedroom?
Yeah,
he was nominated for that.
It's really nice to see all these actors in this movie, the supporting cast as well, that like they've all they're still working, they're still doing amazing films nowadays.
Jeffrey
I mean,
Rush
Judi
did
Dench
Jeffrey
just
Rush.
did Philomena, Jeffrey Rush. They're all working.
Book Thief.
So it's nice to see, even they had like smaller parts in this movie, that they're still flourishing as actors. I would love to talk about the music a little bit in this movie. I believe it was Stephen Warbeck. I mean, I have the soundtrack to Shakespeare in Love. And it's just the violins and the music and the piccolos that are playing underneath. It really reflected the Elizabethan era back then. And
Here it is. Thank you.
How they used it. Like the first time when you're opening up the music, it's building and you can tell it's a romance. And then when they're using it at that party, that dinner party that they were having for the first time, then you hear the same music again on the stage. So they use it in different ways throughout, and it just really reflected the whole tone of the film.
Although I will say this, that Game of Thrones has affected me officially now because there was the scene. It was the first scene that took place sort of kind of in the pub.
Are you talking Game of Thrones or Elizabeth?
No, I'm talking Shakespeare in Love.
Go ahead.
They're in the pub, and for some reason I was like, I just had this feeling of a red wedding coming on, and I was like, oh, because they captured like that scene in the pub. Number one, it's very funny and everything, but it was just like because there was the music in the background. I was like, oh, I just got a flashback to the red wedding. So, but the music in that scene too was pretty good, and then the fight breaks out.
The dancing, and when they're rehearsing on stage, gentlemen upstage, lady downstage. That it's still fun. It's used in a romantic way. It's used in a comedic way. It's
used in a historical way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I loved it. I love the music.
And just in case anybody was wondering, so after Shakespeare in Love, he did Captain Corelli's Mandolin, Proof, Kill Shot, The Debt, the best exotic marigold hotel, and he's he directed the pilot of Masters of Sex. Good for him, because now he'll continue to get, for every other episode, he'll continue to get a paycheck for that.
There you go.
So good for him. That's what John Madden's been up to since Shakespeare in Love.
He's doing fine.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes.
It's doing quite well.
So let's do our last thoughts.
Last thoughts. I know that if you haven't seen this movie and we're just listening to us talk about it, go see it. I think it's timeless. It'll last for years. And I think that not only is it good to keep Shakespeare in the modern eye, because I think it's wonderful works, but to find new interpretations of it and to explore that era is always wonderful. So I will continue watching this movie, and I hope you guys do.
I agree. If you don't like Shakespeare, I definitely would recommend start with Romeo and Juliet. It'll help you. It's a lighter film. A lot more people can relate to that story, and it'll help you get into Shakespeare, it helped me get into Shakespeare a lot more than Macbeth and all the other ones that he's written. And this is just a nice ode to that time period, to Shakespeare, and just like the art that was the whole Elizabethan era back in theater and stage, and how the writing, I think it was just amazing, and they did it tastefully in this movie.
I'm happy that because of this show, I went to go revisit it. So I got to see it with basically a fresh pair of eyes. I looked at it in a whole new light, and I have a different appreciation for it than, say, when I saw it in 1998, which I didn't hate it. I didn't dislike the movie at all. I remember enjoying it, but watching it now, I appreciate it for different things. So, it's definitely, I'm glad that we were able to do it today. So it's good stuff.
For me, it's one of those movies that every time I see it, I always enjoy it, and there's something new about it that I go, I never even really paid attention to that before. So it's one of those I always like to go back and see. I think it's seamless, it's well crafted, it's a movie that's deserving of its nominations, and the music is swelling.
That's like the Academy hook.
And it's so much more than just an adaptation of William Shakespeare. It could be any writer, but the fact that it is even more rich. So it's rich, it's fun, it's just a great movie.
Yeah.
So do watch
Good
it.
stuff.
All right.
And happy Valentine's Day.
Happy
Valentine's.
That is
Happy
our
VD Day.
Valentine's version of Anatomy of a Movie.
There you
Thank
go.
you for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.
Reappreciation of the movie, and then researching and looking at what the other things that it won, like costumes. You get it. You understand why. The production design on it was fantastic. And then something else I noticed was the editing to it. Mm-hmm. I thought was very smooth and and I was like, wow, this movie was edited, put together very well. And so I appreciated it for all those.
It has a huge flowing presence. I mean, you walk away feeling the romance. Not only for me, I do feel it between the characters, but you get this adaptation that to me is technically skillful, and that the shots do flow, that there's like a warmth, and there's fabric, and there's feathers, and just the design of it is wonderful, and it adds to that romance along with the movie. And then on top of that, there's so much intellectual property that they're grasping and twisting, and to me it exists in these layers where they do direct references, but they're also showing scenes. And then there's also the whole other section where you can see his plays just in subtle characters, whether it be like the merchant in Venice being broke and having to look for dowry, and you get that with her fiance. It's just all over the map, and to put so much in a film. And I know there was a comment about they thought that it was almost going to be too smart for the audience, but I think people really enjoy that. They enjoy being able to watch it over and over again and be reminded of all the different things. And that's what I really love, that it captures the multi-layer. It's technically and visually pleasing, and then on top of that, I do feel the love story in it. So
Yeah, there's a love story. Like I said, and all that. You don't even have to be that well versed in Shakespeare, I think, to enjoy this movie. You'll get Merchants of Venice, or you won't.
Yeah.
You go along with the story. It flows pretty evenly, and then hell, if somebody had watched it in 1998 or today, and maybe it encouraged them to pick up and read Shakespeare, hey, that Billy Shakespeare, he could be a big writer someday.
He doesn't suck.
He doesn't suck. Yeah. So
if he existed,
Yeah, that's true. If he even wrote.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Anatomy of a Movie. This week being Valentine's, we'll be doing an open heart surgery. Going back in the past for Shakespeare in Love. I'm John Comerford. I'm joined on the big panel by Marissa Sarfini.
Hello, everyone.
Sarah Stratton.
Hi guys.
Dimitri Panos.
Happy Valentine's Day.
All right. Does everybody remember back to 1998 when this came out?
I do, because I have notes right in front of me.
Of course. Yes, you would. As you would.
I kind of remember it being in theaters,
Wait a
but I
minute.
was
Wait a
still
minute.
really
The
young.
music is swelling. Are you feeling it? Are you
Yeah.
getting into
wrapped
that?
up in the
This
emotion.
I am wrapped. Yes. with
That's
emotion.
right.
I'm swelling in love.
Yes.
Wait.
Close. All right, so I thought this was a nice choice for us. Why not? It's Valentine's week, so
This
Yeah.
is probably one of my favorite romance movies of all time. I do not remember seeing this in theaters. I do not think I was allowed to see
Yes.
it when it was in theaters.
You and me both.
So I found it after, and I probably found it in around high school, and it was kind of when I was also getting into Shakespeare, and I just fell in love with this movie. I'm still in love with this movie. It's probably one of the most frequent movies that I revisit. So
Wow.
I'm very happy to be talking
And Marissa,
about it today.
do you like this one at all? I can't remember.
I love this movie. I have probably watched Shakespeare in Love about 4 times in the last year already.
Wow.
And then, but
Is that
I'm
since January, or is that in the past 12 months?
past 6 months probably. I love the story.
If
We're
you
gonna, if we're gonna believe the conspiracy theory.
And they make nods even to the conspiracies in
Yeah.
this movie, and I find that
Yeah, bring in Marlowe in and the fact that he had somebody else write it for him because he's got great penmanship. I mean, that's what I thought was great about this, as everybody's already talked about. I thought it was well crafted because it not only spoke to the conspiracies about Shakespeare, but also it brought in whether it's theater or film, the whole thing, and the behind the scenes and all that, and the shenanigans that go behind there, as well as it informs the audience of what is involved in the artistic process, and what the muses are, what's the inspiration for this or that, and it's. Not only is it very specific to Shakespeare, it's very general for anybody who's in the artistic process. You don't know where all those things come from, and they find their way into your work. And that part I love.
I agree, the artistic process and the whole behind the scenes of the theater production, because I've done a lot of theater, and just knowing what that's like, and going through those bad auditions, and then getting all these roles that somehow turn into something else, and then all these things that even when you're going live on stage and actually performing it in front of everyone, things change and you just have to go with the flow. And then
one of my favorite moments is Jeffrey Rush when they say, "Well, how's it going to work out?"
I don't know.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It's a
And
mystery.
it is.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is.
And somehow it does.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of theater. And I love it.
I like, another one of my is on the pamphlet. Like,
yeah.
So I mean,
It's a
but
moment.
but today, and I don't. It could have been it could have been foreshadowing or their foresight into the. You go to the movies today and it's 10 minutes of a Skydance production of an Anna Perina film brought to you by Village Roadshow, by Sideshow Collective, presents a Warner Brother film. And that's all I was thinking of. I'm
Yeah.
like going, that's actually sort of brilliant considering that was 1998.
Yeah.
And I like those little touches.
Yeah.
And again, for me, it was more the creative process. It was more of that was the emotional, like, you know, when Gwyneth Paltrow shows up
Yeah.
to play.
audition.
Right. And, you know, that was not to audition, like
beg
at the
pardon.
end, like at the end, like when they're
Who
putting the
actually
play on.
ends up
Oh,
playing
okay.
And she
Juliet.
plays Juliet. Like, you're like, everybody was, it's like, that's an emotional moment because the play is going to go on, you know, and little things like the show must go on.
and not
Go on.
and not only go on, but go on in the proper nature that we want to see
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Like not the initial plan that they set in stone, but how almost like fate would have it, or with the
Right.
ideal situation, and that's what ends up going up in front
Yeah.
of the audience.
Yeah.
And so it just adds even more that she ends up playing her in a way herself.
Exactly. Oh, and then even beyond that, because beyond the shipwreck, she's playing Viola now. I mean, I mean, it's just so well crafted and well layered that you could watch. And I've enjoyed it many times since 1998. So I find myself as I watch it, I go, oh yeah, I don't have time. Oh, I love the scene. Oh wait, yeah, I can't wait for him to say it. And
Wait,
I
just give it another minute because there's a really good line.
exactly,
Yeah.
and I find myself being charmed by it all over again and wanting to watch it. And sticking
and,
through it.
and I think one of the uncredited performances or not, he's credited, but he's not given as much credit due. Ben Affleck is fantastic in this movie. He's
What
hysterical.
is
What play and
What-
what is my pot?
Well, originally he was approached
Gwyneth
for the
Paltrow's
role,
boyfriend.
and that's why he did decide to do this movie. But he was also approached to play Shakespeare for this film instead of just a side note. Yeah, or it was like mentioned as they were searching and almost in
Did not
vain.
know that.
But
Thank you,
even his
sir.
character, and even Ned had added to the story because it was his suggestion to change the name to Romeo and Juliet, and then it was his suggestion to write in the love scene in between marriage and death, and so even his small character, story of Romeo and Juliet, and I got into Romeo and Juliet in high school because we were forced to read
That's
it,
when
but
everybody
I
gets
loved
into
it.
it.
And then, I discovered Shakespeare in Love around the same time, and it just really hit me, and it stuck with me, and I've loved it ever since.
Dimitri, chime in here.
I appreciate the movie for what it is. I don't herald it as one of the greatest romance movies of all time. I do show it, especially, and I should say this, I just watched the movie last night. First time I've seen the movie since I saw it in theaters in 1998. So to me, it always goes as the movie that stole the Academy Award for Best Picture from Saving Private Ryan. Not that I was bitter about it, but that's what it always went down as. And, I'll talk about that later. So revisiting the movie and going in that it's Valentine's Day, and I recognize the romance in the movie, but to me, I was like, wow, I'm really surprised as to how much a farce it plays on the movie business. I know nothing about producing a play, outside of Bialystok and Bloom. So, but the movie aspect of the producer and don't they get back end? Oh, sure, but what if we make no money?
Profits.
It's like, well,
Profits.
great, even better. So all that stuff I really liked, but then I noticed that the movie was more about writing the play and putting the play on. I found most of the emotional stuff came from when Romeo and Juliet was being played out, and the birth of it, the origin of it, the way that this movie supposes that it happened, that I really enjoyed. The romance, you get involved with it, but at the end they don't end up together. There's no particular reason, like, other than the queen
neither
says
did Romeo and Juliet. So
yeah, well, but there's a reason why they don't end up together. I do like the little Shakespearean nods, like the miscommunications and things like that. So I appreciated. I had a